Senator Warren is infuriated that this is beyond her power to address. And of course, the reason it's beyond her power is because she created it that way and persuaded Barack Obama and the Congress to enact it.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and my next guest is James Freeman. He is assistant editor at the Wall Street Journal's editorial page, and he's the author of the Best of the Web column. James, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Andy. Great to be here.
So you had this piece in the Journal about Elizabeth Warren and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB. She was instrumental in setting this up. Donald Trump is going after the Bureau. It appears there is little she can do, in large part because of the way it was designed in the first place. So just tell our listeners, our viewers, what is the CFPB and what's going on?
Yeah, thanks. This is one of those be careful what you wish for stories. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, as you recall, it was set up in the 2010 Dodd-Frank law after the great financial crisis, or a financial crisis, as some people call it. So it was kind of an odd creation right from the start. There were already lots of financial regulators, but she said we need another one. And except this one is going to be different. It's not going to worry about the safety and soundness of financial institutions, which is pretty dangerous in a financial regulator. But also the big issue was she wanted to insulate it from political control.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this happened in 2010, and Democrats, I think rightly at the time, were thinking there's going to be a political pushback coming soon. They were doing Obamacare, they were doing this Dodd-Frank law, a lot of regulation. That was the Tea Party movement. So they kind of figured that their majorities were not going to last forever. Maybe their hold on the White House not going to last all that much longer either. So she designed it basically, and it was passed by Congress, signed by President Obama, to be largely independent, to the point where it doesn't, unlike every other agency just about, it doesn't have to go to Congress to get appropriations. It just draws money from the Federal Reserve up to a certain formula. But basically, as much as the director of this bureau wants, up to that statutory limit.
I want to sort of focus on that for a second, because that is, I don't think people, who've been in Washington a long time, I can't think of another agency that does this. It draws its money down, so almost has like a blank check, and it's from the Federal Reserve, not from Congress.
Yeah.
So there is, in essence, is there any congressional oversight? Is there a way for Congress to sort of check in on what's going on? Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, you would think that good governance might say, hey, maybe there should be some elected official who has some idea of what these bureaucrats are doing.
Yeah, I mean, there is congressional oversight, but unlike, as you said, typical agencies, they don't really have to pay attention to it, because the normal process is there's congressional oversight. Our elected officials, the people that we chose, get to ask, what are you doing with the money? Question whether it's being spent in the right way. And then the agencies essentially have to persuade Congress to appropriate their budgets every year. This is different. Now, there are a few other regulators that at least partly fund themselves through fees, essentially taxes on the industries they regulate, that sort of thing. And that applies to some of the financial regulators. But this phenomenon of not having to deal with Congress for money and being able to draw at will up to it's 12% of the Fed's operating expenses. And then there's an inflation formula as well. So now it's more than $800 million a year. The director of this bureau can just grab at will without having to get anyone's approval. And that is almost
$1 billion a year.
Yeah.
With no congressional oversight. So, okay. So that, I guess that's good as long as you like what the Bureau is doing. Tell us what the Bureau's been up to. And again, the Democrats will point to this and say this freedom that this agency has insulates it from political influence and allows them to really represent the consumer's interest. I think that would be sort of
I
the
guess in theory,
rationale,
yes.
right? Yeah. But so what pelts have they put on the wall? They must have done something here.
Yeah, in terms of impact of the bureau, I mean, it's hard to tell. Obviously, a lot of harassment of businesses, and certainly you can give financial companies a really hard time if you don't have to worry about the impact on their business, on the solvency of the bank, what have you. If you can, demand things, whether or not they're economically viable, that gives you a lot of freedom as a regulator. Uh, I mean, you look at auto loans and so forth. I guess they would say they have acted on behalf of the consumer. Other people would say they've added a lot of cost and
Mhm.
complexity in those markets. But wait, yeah, whether they do a good job or a bad job, it doesn't really matter. And people will probably not be surprised to learn that since they get to decide their funding, at least up to that limit, their budget has been growing faster than other financial regulators in recent years. Again, having no
Right.
accountability is nice. You don't have to sort of justify your existence to congressional appropriators, and now it's just this sort of ultimate irony where Russ Vought, who's the Trump budget director, now the acting director of this bureau, has decided not to draw money anymore. And Senator Warren is infuriated that this is beyond her power to address. And of course, the reason it's beyond her power is because she created that way and persuaded Barack Obama and the Congress to enact it.
So the jujitsu move here is the Vought, who is the new OMB director, names himself the head of the bureau, which I guess is within his. Well, I
Well,
guess
he
that's
hasn't
me.
named himself. The president has
Oh,
selected him,
okay.
but yes,
Yeah,
he
right.
is
Yes,
also
right.
serving as the acting
Right.
bureau director. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So Trump names him as OMB, then Vought names himself to be head of the bureau, and then he looks at the bureau and says, "You know what? We don't need this $780,000 or whatever." He's turning back to the Federal Reserve, I guess.
Yep.
And as you say, because the way this was set up to insulate it from Congress, a senator has no real ability to reach in and do anything about this. I guess it's ironic or it's payback or something, but does what's plan B? I mean, the Democrats aren't going to just give up on this, I assume.
I mean, I don't think they have one in for the long haul. I think in the short term, I'm I would assume they can find a sympathetic judge to try and get in the way of this. Ultimately, I think they lose because of the way they wrote the law to ensure that senators could not mess with the bureau. And I think whether Elizabeth Warren is going to say maybe I shouldn't create unaccountable bureaucracies again, I don't know. But I think for anyone it maybe, and this is, I think, one virtue of the second Trump term here is good questions being asked about
Mhm.
the function of these so-called independent agencies, which over the years have sprouted up in Washington, and it's very hard to figure out how they fit within the Constitution. It's a creation that's not, as we said, not really accountable for funding to Congress. It also is insulated in some ways from the rest of the executive branch in terms of a sole director having an enormous amount of discretion. The
Mhm.
president can remove the bureau director under certain circumstances, but it's a lot of power for someone who was not elected, and
Yeah.
I think you're going to see that. I would hope a kind of a rethinking of getting back to the constitutional way, which is that you have a legislative branch and a judicial branch and an executive branch, and you don't really want to create hybrid creatures that aren't accountable in the constitutional design to any of them.
We've talked a lot on the show about this, whether there is a looming constitutional crisis coming up with these sorts of questions, but and this is sort of a specific agency in a specific way. So that's why I was so interested in talking to you about it. I'm talking to James Freeman, by the way. He's from the Wall Street Journal. He's written this fascinating piece about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. But how do you view the larger question of this fight that's coming down, it looks, between the executive and the Congress about who, once money is appropriated, who gets to decide how it's spent?
Well, that's there is going to be that larger fight about impoundment, the ability of the president to choose not to spend money that has been appropriated by Congress. Now, this fight we've just been talking about is maybe the easier one for Team Trump because thanks to Senator Warren, she created this beast to be unaccountable. But there is a larger throughout the government question of, does the president have the authority to just choose not to spend on executive branch agencies that have been funded by Congress because he thinks it's wasteful, unnecessary, what have you. There was during the last days of Nixon, toward the last days of Nixon, there was a law passed which says the president cannot choose not to spend. But I think this may come under Supreme Court challenge during this administration, because there is quite a body of legal work to say this is not constitutional. I don't think it's ever really been seriously challenged, and it should be, to clarify what the powers of the executive are versus the legislature.